This episode is made possible by US Bank and Brex, the AI-powered spend platform.
Hello, it's Eric Emmons, CFO of Nintex, and you are listening to the CFO Thought Leader Podcast.
This is episode 1066.
Great FP&A people truly understand how the business actually works and how the data actually works. And this is very relevant in today's world I used to talk about AI and machine learning before it was cool. And it was that marrying that experience of deep data analytics, hands-on kind of data architecture, almost data engineering, with the FP&A kind of business partnership mindset connects together is kind of what I would think of as the modern CFO who can truly connect, be able to tell that story to investors with not just kind of what FP&A can say as far as the business, but really what does the data and the customer data tell you, and being able to simplify that in a way that, not just investors, but anyone else can understand what is it that, you're doing.
Hi, it's Jack. On today's show, we speak with Cosmin Pitigoi, CFO of Flywire. Arriving at a high school in Cape Town, South Africa, without speaking English, Cosmin Pitigoi faced an immediate communication challenge. Immersing himself in English language studies and expanding his vocabulary, Pitigoi began to thrive in the classroom. Years later, that same resolve reemerged in eBay's IR function, where Pitigoi had realized the company's available data was falling short when it came to communicating the breadth of the eBay story. This time, Pitigoi immersed himself in the data. You'll hear that story and much more on today's episode. We'll begin after this. Have you heard about Brex? It's the world's smartest corporate card. Finance leaders love it because it's got powerful controls and rewards that help them make every dollar count. Here's why Brex cards are so smart. You can embed your expense policy inside the card. This lets you control employee spending before it even happens. Brex cards also automate manual expense, tasks like receipts, memos, and reviews. So you're free to focus on optimizing your company finances. Over 25,000 companies take every dollar further with Brex. Join them at brex.com/grow. Hello, we're speaking with Cosmin Pitigoi, CFO of Flywire. Cosmin, welcome.
Thank you, Jack. Thanks for having me on this podcast. I appreciate it. Very excited about our conversation today.
Yeah, likewise, Cosmin. I was going over your background. Wow, sort of an exciting career to share with our listeners. And of course, at our kickoff here, this is what we ask you to do. If you wouldn't mind, go back in time for us and try to identify some of those experiences you feel prepared you as a finance leader as you advanced. What were those?
Well, I think one thing that I'm known for, both in terms of how I develop other leaders and myself, is sort of number one thing is just rotating through a number of leadership roles. And, I sort of felt that it was important for me as I built my finance career broadly that I rotate through several different areas, both within finance, but also outside of finance. So I was at PayPal and eBay for around 20 years. But I was never in the same role for more than 18 months. So I really built that. So first is this kind of rotational through leadership roles in as many functions as you can get through. And at a large scale kind of company, that was very helpful for me. Second, I think an important role that I felt helped me pivot my entire actually leadership style, but certainly as a CFO, was my time in investor relations. And it was that I sort of did that investor relations rotation at a pivotal time in my career where I was going from being an individual contributor, having built sort of, a lot of the analytics you'll see about me, I'm very much a deep data kind of quantitative kind of guy, but being able to take that and tell a story was such a powerful moment, not just as a CFO, but as a leader in general. So I would say the second thing was that time in investor relations that I spent and sort of learning how to tell a story with data in a powerful way. And then look, I think the third thing I would say that really prepared me was always being in intense transformational situations. So every single time, and maybe this is just me or my luck, but every single time I walked into a function, we had to do some major transformation. And being part of these transformational moments in a company's sort of time and journey shapes you as a leader. And it's usually in the tough times that you're shaped. And so I can't say that I had a lot of times where just like everything's going great, guys, nothing to do. I've always been in the middle of the biggest fires. And so that's sort of the third thing. So again, sort of the rotational experience, investor relation and communication. And third is, so I would call it sort of intense transformation at scale. Those are the three things that really kind of captured what I felt prepared me to sort of take on this role as CFO.
When we see a career that expands across the period that yours does, I just want to, you sort of kicked off in the .com era, and you were way back when you were at E-Trade for a number of years. You landed on your feet at eBay. But I'm just curious, at the time you didn't go to a .com, and for those who might not know, I never thought of E-Trade as a .com. It wasn't a large company back then, though. It had to be fairly small, the company that you joined. Can you recall for us some of that early chapter?
Yeah, it was, I had actually, so if I go back a little bit, I was born in Romania. I actually grew up, went to school in South Africa, learned a few languages along the way, moved to the US and landed just around towards the end of the .com era, if you will. And so I joined E-Trade, initially in operations. And yes, it was a small business, but it was such an intense time. This is the peak of everything .com. You could not go wrong. I was actually a stockbroker at the time, and I was executing orders for everyone in the Valley, selling their stock at prices that didn't make any sense to me, certainly as an immigrant coming in, looking at these numbers. So it was it was a booming business, right? Because of course everyone needed to sort of do all these trades and get their stock out of these companies, and it was definitely a heyday. And then I saw the .com kind of crash. So again, sort of the story of my career. I walked into E-Trade, and a few years later, we went through the .com crash and had to pivot to some extent my career at that point. And that's when I was on an operational kind of business path, and I decided to pivot more towards finance at that point, and look at other opportunities. And it wasn't easy. I kind of came in through treasury actually at eBay. That was sort of the bridge from being a background in stock brokerage and operations. But definitely saw the value of understanding the macro picture and the markets, and realized that the finance function has that sort of hand on the pulse. And so I felt like going in that direction deeper was an important pivot in my career at that time.
Yeah. Interesting early lesson for you as you landed on your feet there. What you shared with us is so true. I just looking through your bio, all the number of titles that you had. And again, and you can correct these numbers, but I was looking at 8 years at eBay and maybe another 11 years and more at PayPal. So you invested all these career years across, these two entities, just an impressive investment of years, but all along the way, different job titles. How did you sort of find these new opportunities? Were you proactive in this? And I have to believe you were in some way.
I was, yeah. I sort of, we had some standard rotational programs that people did, sort of a 6 months a rotational program. But I sort of created my own version of it, which was longer, because one thing that I realized that 6 months is not long enough to really make an impact in an area and really learn it. So I developed this sort of three-stage kind of the three stages of any rotational opportunity, which is first, you learn everything there is to know about that function. Second, you start making an impact and driving value. And then third is probably the hardest stage that I talk to some of my more younger sort of mentees. It's I want to leave a legacy in that function, and so leave something behind. So every time I've sort of been in a function, once I've learned it, I've started making an impact and driving value, is leave something behind that will be there for many years after. And so I felt like sort of 18 months is sort of that time where you actually can leave and make an impact before you go, and leave something lasting behind you. And that's sort of my sort of leave a legacy, if you will, quote that people know me for a little bit, because I feel like that's such an important step before you can then move on to the next thing. But it was not easy, because you, at every point in your career, you kind of have to explain to your boss, who you've now built a relationship with, that, hey, I've got to move on. And so early on, what I found helpful was to be very upfront and transparent about your career paths. And look, this is where I want, I want to be CFO one day, going to come in here and learn and make an impact, but I'm going to move on. And so I need you to help support me in this journey. And you'll be surprised how open leaders are. But it's important to build that, because naturally most businesses and most functions leaders don't love letting go of their talent. It's a hard one. So, I've learned along the way, again, just from that rotational kind of mindset, that I do that with my own leaders. I tell them, hey, look, I love you, and I want to help you build your career, but there's only so many things I can do for you depending on what function I'm in. So many times I've had leaders work for me that I've helped say, look, you got to take this opportunity. It may not be in my group, but it'll help you build your career. And then you may end up coming back working for me. And that's one of my tests of my own ability as a leader, is do people come back to me once I've let them go? And I think that's been an important mindset that, in any large company, that you have to kind of cultivate that ability to make the case for moving around, and help people understand why you're doing that.
Am I wrong? I look at, you mentioned the treasury function is where you originally landed at eBay. You were there for roughly a longer term than what we were just describing. And of course, that's where you're first getting acclimated, and the people around you are getting to know you. So understandably, that might have been a longer transition. For all those career builders out there, when you come in and get acquainted with a company for the first time, naturally, that would be a longer stint.
Yeah, what you don't see necessarily in there, that I actually started at PayPal in treasury, and then actually moved to eBay. So, and PayPal treasury was a bit more different, more operational in nature than eBay was a bit more corporate. So I started more in the kind of an operational function in treasury, and so, managing the operational part of treasury. And then actually at eBay, I did more of the foreign exchange, and corporate kind of capital allocation. So I got different parts of treasury. Treasury can be a lot of different things. A lot of people actually specialized within treasury. So I got to do a bunch of different kind of areas, and also work with both PayPal and eBay during those 3 years. So it's definitely a foundational kind of part of it. But yeah, my entry was actually, so I started at PayPal, went to eBay, and then came back to PayPal at the end of my career.
Those two organizations are married in that sense, I guess, with talent. It looks like you become the top FP&A. You become a top FP&A professional, and you have all sorts of tours of duty across the business. And again, you have the investor relations experience along the way as well. Can you reveal to us in some way how they had synergies together, your FP&A experience and your ability to step in and talk to analysts and communicate, and then step back in to another FP&A stint?
Yeah, and I think I probably would add the other bookend. So if you think of FP&A sort of being in the middle as the core of, you both understand the business and the financials. You have at one extreme, you have investor relations, where now you're more outward facing and telling the story. At the other extreme that you see in my background is data and analytics. And that's where you sort of, I started actually in FP&A when I came back to PayPal, and I said, like, I need to go deeper in the data, and so that's where I started doing some of the data transformation and analytics work that I had done in my career, which helped me then get even closer to the business and the data and sort of the customer behaviors that are so important to understand for you to be a great FP&A person. I think, great FP&A people truly understand how the business actually works and how the data actually works. And this is very relevant in today's world I used to talk about AI and machine learning before it was cool. And it was that marrying that experience of deep data analytics, hands-on kind of data architecture, almost data engineering, with the FP&A kind of business partnership mindset, with kind of at the other end of the spectrum, being able to tell the story with all that data is what I would feel like is sort of the end to end, those three components. They really do, very much sort of connect together as kind of what I would think of as the modern CFO who can truly connect, be able to tell that story to investors with not just kind of what FP&A can say as far as the business, but really what does the data and the customer data tell you? And being able to simplify that in a way that, not just investors, but anyone else can understand what is it that, you're doing.
That ability to look into the data, and just going back in time, I have to believe your visibility along the way got better and better as more data was collected, as it was cleaned up more effectively, and as it became more real time, perhaps, towards the end of your tenure. Were there milestones? I mean, as you look back, was there a period in time where you only had so much data available to you, and then it took a quantum leap?
Yeah, I would say there's always, I think there's people are saying, look, we have lots of data. And to me, that's saying, I have a big bucket of Lego pieces. That's great. But how you actually structure that data and how you architect around it and how you define it is almost as important as saying you have a lot of it. And as the quality of it is a different way of saying matters as much as the quantity of it. And so we always had, there always is, a lot of companies say, there's lots of data. And so the big pivot that happened actually, and this was one of the big, pivots in my own career, was the reason I went into the data side early on at PayPal actually was to go restructure and create a data architecture that then would help me be even a better FP&A person. So, and not only that, but also from an organizational standpoint, bring together the analytics team as a unit to create a unified sort of voice and culture because sort of analytics was a little bit more spread out throughout the company, and brought that together, brought a lot of the data, the most critical data together, that this is the data that we need to get right. I would call it certified data, if you will. And it's not as much as you think you need, but it's the highest quality data that you want to make sure is right, because then you can build, we built incredible sort of machine learning capabilities on top of that. But it took basically me having to go almost sort of play the role of, had some great folks around me in terms of data engineering and data architecture that then helped us build, again, things at scale. So you don't have to have like 20 people. Every time you ask a question, everyone runs around trying to answer that question. You have the data architected in a way, the data that's most important. And that's where it's important as a data leader to understand what data is most important. Because sometimes you can go into this like, well, beautiful mind, everything's, amazing. So you really need to hone in on understand the business first, and then you can prioritize the right data that will help you with the right business insights to tell the stories that you want. So it's helpful for me to start in investor relations, work my way back into that data, because then I knew how to sort of, what are the things that are going to make me make the most strategic decisions? What is the data that I need for that, as opposed to trying to boil the ocean, if you will?
If you just said you were in the sort of the investor relations role, and it really occurred to you that you could tell the story so much more effectively if you had the right data. So how do we get that data? So you're working back from the storytelling to create an architecture that allowed access to that data. Am I right?
Exactly. Yeah. And FP&A helps you kind of decide what are the actions you need to take. So, between telling the story taking the right actions from a business perspective, that's the role of FP&A, is identifying those. Then, you can definitely sort of have almost the right to say, what is the most important data that we need as a company? And that was probably one of the most transformational parts for me, sort of as a leader and also as a finance person, but also for the organization and the data in particular. I think that was that big leap, I guess, that then enabled us to then create either models or insights that we could not in the past.
I know we're speaking broadly here, but again, I'm trying to get a sense of how this data became increasingly visible and more strategic for you over time. You were eBay's director of investor relations around 2012. Is that right? 2011, 2012? Yeah. And so just what you just described, this is where you were really hungry for that data to better tell the story. The types of architecture, when you talk about that architecture, if you could go back in time and just give yourself a heads up, like don't pay attention to this. Zero in on this piece of it. We spent so much time going down these blind alleys looking for this. It never existed. This is what we should have been doing. Or no, is that not, that never crosses your mind? Was there any piece of those discussions that you were having with the data analysts, that you're happy with the customer support people who were trying to understand the customer better? Was there anything that if you could go back in time and tell them what, here's what we could have done maybe a little better or a little differently?
I think usually this is sort of basic data architecture stuff, but it's, identify what are the most critical, not just metrics but also the dimensions. And so almost defining what is the cube that you would want to be able to build, and understanding how that ties into the strategy you may have. And usually, look, it's the three dimensions that we tend to always come back to there's a customer dimension, and that depends on who your customers are. There's a product dimension. So that depends, again, kind of how many products you have. And usually the third one is something like a geographic dimension, because many businesses, if you're an international business, that's important. And being able to then create that cube that you can basically pivot at any point in time and say, well, show me this customer view. And then I want to pivot. Show me the customer by product. Show me the customer by product in this geography. Being able to structure the data and describe it that way to the data engineers who are building it, to be able to say, look, when I ask you to pivot from, visually pivot from one of these dimensions to another, I want to be able to do that in real time. I don't want you to have to go rebuild a whole bunch of data and take more than 5 minutes to get back to me. That creates that clarity. But to some extent, you have to know what is it that, drives the business. What's the strategy? What are the key dimensions? And then within that, then you will then be able to create this, kind of because you can't obviously you can go boil the ocean, like I said, and you end up with too many dimensions that you can kind of get buried in it. And, ideally kind of get it down to what are the 2 or 3. I'm a big rule of 3 kind of, person. So I sort of feel like, what are the 3 most important things? And it helps clarify a lot of areas, but making sure that those are connected to each other. So you can truly, I want to see that specific customer. I want to see how is their product performing in that market. That usually gets me to the core of the question and the strategy.
Well, I just want to quickly just point out to the listeners just some of your titles. And again, these were 15-month stints, most of them perhaps, but of course, some titles that they'll be familiar with. And then the opportunities that come your way. You were a senior director of global analytics. You were a senior director of global corporate FP&A. You went to the ranks of VPs, and you have a number of different vice president, chief financial officer of the Americas, PayPal, VP, CFO, PayPal product sales and marketing. Going on up towards the end of your tenure at PayPal, you were a senior vice president, global FP&A, operational finance and pricing. And again, just want to understand better, because there are a lot of finance people who do get trapped and who didn't have this ability to climb to the next rung, or even identify a new rung, which I think you might have done from time to time. Here's something more I can learn. This is an area I don't know about. Diplomacy, what is it? Are you, what does it take to swing open the door to the types of opportunities that you found along the way?
I think I would probably summarize it as curiosity is important. And one thing that I usually tell my sort of folks who work for me and is that almost approach your, how you spend your day in a sort of an 80-20 kind of rule, which is spend 80% of your time on the current job that you have and ensuring that you do that at the highest level of excellence, but then spend the other 20% learning about everything else in the company that impacts your job, and not just learning it from a, actual process steps, but understand the people outside of that. So I always spent a good amount of my time, outside of my core job, sort of going down, sort of upstream and downstream from me in every single area. And I would sort of reach out to people who most of the time everyone would say like, why are you even talking to the head of customer service? And for me, it was curiosity to say, well, I want to find out, how our customers are, what they're telling us, and how is that data being captured, or what are we doing about it? And so there's a curiosity that I had around how does everything connect to everything else? And it's usually the answer is people. And so people sometimes will ask me like, well, why did you stay 20 years at PayPal? Is because I had built these sort of deep relationships with so many people outside of my function. And to sort of wrap up on your question is, it's out of that 20% that the next job came out of. So, when I was in treasury, I was curious, like, hey, I'm processing all this cash that comes in. Like, where is it coming from? Like, who's making these decisions? And, so I talked to the head of FP&A, kind of a casual, like, hey, explain to me how you I didn't even know what FP&A was at the time, because all I knew was stock brokerage and treasury. So, and I thought it was interesting. And I said, hey, can I help you with some of the stuff you're doing? That's the other thing. It's just sort of, hey, out of my spare time, I'll help you with some projects, or let me help you understand treasury. And out of that came a few months later, hey, you want to come work in FP&A, and so forth. Investor relations, same thing. I had product finance, and I knew the product better than probably most people. And I sort of said to the IR folks, hey, I'm happy to help you describe what new products we're going to launch, and just in my spare time, if you will. My wife, we have 4 kids, by the way, so I'm busy outside of work too. It definitely takes a lot of balancing of all these things, but it was always out of curiosity, I guess, and then also interest in connecting with people, in particular across the whole organization.
That's a great overview for us. Great 80-20 framework for some of the career builders out there. Wonderful way to look at the world. We might have a few more career-related questions for you, but right now we want to find out about Flywire. I do have one last one, though. I always like to know, ultimately, when you step into a CFO role, is it a recruiter? Is it part of your network? Is it both? What can you characterize it for us? How do you get to the opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit of both, especially for sort of larger roles. There may be a recruiter involved, but in the end, it's going to be your, sort of the extent of all the relationships you've built. Because inevitably, the board's going to call somebody, the exec team is going to call somebody, everyone's going to know someone, and so
yeah. Let's not give too much credit to that recruiter out there.
Yes, yeah.
Ultimately, it's the reputation you built over 20 years. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, let's jump to Flywire. Tell us about this company today. What is it about? What are its offerings?
So maybe just start with the origin story, because I think to some extent that sometimes helps. So Flywire started out of the need of you have international students who want to study abroad. So imagine this student in Europe going to a university in the US and saying, look, I need to pay my tuition, and I've got euros and I need to pay it in dollars. And along the way, if you've had this experience, that money got lost. The person, the student got frustrated. It was MIT, I think it was, and couldn't find the wire, couldn't find the money, couldn't identify the student. So this was many, many years ago. And so out of that, basically we created the software that enables the university to say, I know the student. I am trying to be operationally efficient in the back end in terms of being able to, one, convert convert those euros into dollars and ensure that I then, when I receive that money, I know who the student is. And then I also can book it into my system of record. So, the way we talk about Flywire, we've now grown, far beyond that. We're almost, $500 million of revenue, 1,300 employees. And the value we talk about is software driving value in payments. That's sort of our headline. And so we are a payments company, but at our core, the value that we feel is driven in that payments kind of process is the software that in this case would be, and we've gone far past just the international students. We now have, domestic processing capabilities. And so think of a university uses our software to basically process all those many student, sort of incoming tuition, but also any other payments that they may have, and be able to convert them, so especially for international students. So think of we're large cross-border payments. We are, and complex, I think, operationally. So we're solving an operational problem, I think, as opposed to just a simple payments problem. We're solving the problem of an operational side. So look, education is one of our verticals. We have 4 verticals. It's education, travel, healthcare, and B2B. So we've expanded past that because what we found is it's not just the university who needs to be more efficient in sort of the back office. We found that, travel, if you're a travel agent and you're receiving, by the way, large, cross-border payments from somebody who's traveling internationally, and you need to book those payments into your system of record, you don't want to deal with that stuff. You want to deal with the customer. So again, that same sort of software capability then is a platform that works well for that. It works well for healthcare. Again, large payments, or for a B2B, if you're a manufacturing business, a small business, and you're trying to receive international payments again. So you kind of see how this platform plays out well. And it's not just about the payments. It's really the software that creates an operational value for the back office. And so we're mostly focused on receivables. That's kind of our unique approach, but is this idea of software driving value in payments, as the whole payments industry right now is trying to figure out how do I add more value for us. We feel that the software is where the value comes from.
So tell us about, again, this company went public in 2021, I guess. So you're stepping into a mature finance organization. Clearly it has would have its accounting function and quarterly mindset. But how are you going to, right size it? Are you going to make it more efficient, expand the FP&A team? What is it that you can do with this finance function?
Yeah. So when I first came into the role, this is now not quite a year ago. It was sort of late March last year. Came in. The first thing I did is I came in with a particular vision around, we are as a business at that point where you have to, you have to build scale. I think, we've got scale, but obviously I come from a place that is sort of trillions of dollars of volume. We're at the billions, many billion stage. So being able to go from here to there requires some retooling around being able to scale. And so that's one of the things that I knew coming in, that I had the opportunity to make an impact. Second, it was around the function, the role that finance plays. And so for me, coming in, a couple of things. One, set the vision of this is who we want to be, which is, in simple terms for me, is finance needs to be a business partner to the business, the right hand to the business. You can define it however you want, but for me, that's sort of the simple way of saying we need to be the right hand. We need to be that guiding hand, that trusted partner that helps you along. And what does that mean? And so I also set sort of the culture and the priorities for the team to say, look, the culture that I want is we are kind of a talent builder, talent magnet, and we are sort of the area that helps think of it as the central nervous system, almost, if you will, because a lot of different parts of the business, as you get bigger and bigger and more complex, you kind of need a central core to kind of bring it all together. And finance usually can play that role because we naturally, especially if you're FP&A, but really all the different functions together, because it's not just FP&A, it's accounting, it's treasury, it's tax, it's audit, all these different functions, if you work well together as a unit. So for me, setting that culture in place to say, look, we're going to have strong leaders in all these functions. So I came in, and that's kind of what I structured as I have sort of a head of FP&A, head of treasury, a head of controllership and audit and tax, and I also actually have the CIO organization and data organization reporting into me. If we act as a unit when we show up, not just as different blocks, we are so much more. We have such a more stronger voice, if you will, at the table, which kind of goes back to the vision. So I kind of went around. I restructured the org to be in this kind of fashion, like so. Clearly, each of the different functions brought in. If we didn't have the leaders in place, I brought in leaders who are people that are, best in class at what they do, and to some extent also help me kind of be able to delegate and drive the kind of impact that we can have. So that was sort of the first thing. In addition to that, building, again, back to relationships. Spent a good amount of time with our shareholders, with our board, and really created the mindset of we need as a function, and also for myself, to really build very close relationships with all of our external stakeholders, internal stakeholders. So spend time with shareholders as much as I then spend time with the product managers to understand how does the product really work, and our sales folks. And so that's, again, from my background, as you saw from my career, I spend time supporting each one of those functions. I was the finance guy from product, I was the finance guy for sales. So I know exactly how these are very different personality types. And so I've learned over time, and the importance of spending time with each of them. So that's sort of when I came in, that was sort of the restructuring that I kind of did across the team, and built that mindset of we are the right hand to the business, and how do we act and make sure that we're involved in the right decisions along the way.
So I'm curious, you mentioned all these new leaders. I got to imagine there's an FP&A leader among them. When you went looking for that leader, what are the qualities or characteristics, just given your background? This would be a tough one, I think, for the individual walking through the door, just given your past.
Yeah. So maybe I'll talk about the qualities primarily. Because, I've been fortunate enough to know a lot of people. So there was, sort of a wide spectrum of who would be interested to go on this journey, with me. But I look in FP&A, there's a combination of being able to understand the data and the business really well. But then as much of it is really about influencing with the business. And so you need someone who can create a relationship with the business leaders who's had that business unit experience, where they're not just, call it sort of corporate FP&A mindset, where we just sort of process. Process is important, and planning obviously is part of the actual title. But as much of it is around, can you create a relationship with the business partner? So having that mindset of business partnership, for me, I put that above a lot of other kind of characters, because everyone can check the box on, yes, they can plan, they can probably even have experience in the business, but there's very few people who you're comfortable putting in front of a bunch of different business units internally, business unit leaders, and within 2 months, those business leaders are going to say, I can't actually function without this person. It becomes almost like they're almost addicted to them, if you will, to put it that way. So that personality, and there's not a lot of people who have that. A lot of people sort of check the other boxes, but that's a hard box to check. And the other thing I would say around that is not that they just do what the business unit leader says. They're able to navigate this very sort of careful balance of, I'm going to be the good guy and bad guy. So we're going to be sort of tough with you because you need to push yourself to maybe cut some costs or sign up for a bigger number. But at the same time, be able to say, look, here's how we're going to navigate this together. And here's what's fair. And so being able to be that true partner, when I say business partner, I don't mean we just do what the business unit says. We're going to have our own opinion. So that's a very sort of hard personality to find, where you can find someone who can play those roles and be that tough partner, like a good friend who's just going to tell you when you're acting crazy kind of thing. That's a true friend who's willing to tell you during the tough times and be real with you. I think of that as partnership, but that's a very unique, personality type, which is hard to find. So, and I'm been fortunate to work with many of them. And that's something that for me, it was something that it's a skill set that I had to hone over many, many years.
I want to quickly touch on AI with you, and you mentioned that the IT function is part of your purview. Tell us something about how AI is likely to advance a strategic advantage here for Flywire.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's probably one useful framework for AI, because I've heard, that's the $1 trillion question, is how is AI going to change everything? And we think it will change a lot. But I think for finance in particular, but also maybe for other use cases, I think it was somebody at Cisco who had this framework, which I found helpful, which was you have to look at it along sort of two dimensions, which is accuracy and fluency. So it's kind of like with ChatGPT, right? If you ask it to write a poem, it's great. You can do all sorts of creative stuff. But if I need it from an accuracy perspective, I need a pinpoint accuracy number with backup, it's likely not going to be quite as accurate unless the data underneath is great. So for me, it starts having been deep on the data side and building machine learning models. You realize that, your output is only as good as the input, which is the old adage. Works well with AI. AI is only as good as kind of the data that you're training it on. It's funny to see everyone starting to close their doors now, that they're realizing that the data we have is the most important sort of part of building the AI capability. So with that in mind, we're, a couple of things. As you said, yes, we have a number of machine learning sort of use cases that we've built over time to automate certain parts of our process, whether that's on the customer service side, or even you can imagine you get lots of documents that come in. If you can have a machine start to read into those documents and start to say, okay, this looks the same as this other one, so therefore you can help students, for example, with going through several steps in documentation. So that could be an example that's already there. But for me, and then having the CIO organization, data organization under me, is restructuring and rebuilding kind of the data architecture in a way to get to those kind of key metrics and dimensionality that I talked about. Then you build those machine learning use cases on top that can automate a lot of the stuff that we do. That's, I would say, is, sort of the second phase and how we're thinking of kind of the opportunity going forward. Because look, I think, and that's finance data, but it's as interesting on the customer data, because, we actually have majority of international students out there. We have visibility into large swaths of kind of international students and how those patterns and what where they go. Or travelers, right? We have the travel business where we can see, this type of traveler maybe going to this type of destination. And so there's a lot of data when I think organizations need to identify what unique data do we have access to, and figure out, as you think about what, models you build and what sort of again, AI capabilities you build, what makes that which you have most unique, and that you can then sort of create, a unique data set that you can then train others.
What is the unique data that we have? That's for every company out there. Well, that might be the first question. How is AI going to change our business? Well, what's our unique data?
Yeah,
am I overstating that?
Yeah, and you have to identify that pretty quickly and figure out a way to see if you can harness it and structure in a way. Because many times, again, it goes back to my point with the big bucket of Lego. It's you can let AI loose on on an ERP system, but if it's not well defined, it's not going to give you any insight. But if you structure in a way that can actually navigate and understand kind of what the dimensions are and that are important to you, And so many times data is as much about definition and governance, which is a little bit boring, but it's really important to define what is a customer. Because again, customers can mean many things. And so being able to define those things and tell that AI model or machine learning model, this customer is different than this one because of this, then that model can actually run and be even smarter than if you just let it try to guess that, this person over here is different than this or is the same as that. So it's a lot of the sort of the boring stuff, as always, the stuff that's painful a little bit, but creates the most value. But I'm excited, and I've always been a fan of the machine learning capabilities that you can build, but it takes some work underneath to really do that, to make it work.
We're going to jump to our finance strategic moment question, where we just ask finance leaders to look back in time and sort of cherry pick out for us one moment of insight that they've experienced along the way. Call it an aha moment, but some way you realize, wow, this is really powerful, and this is finance being strategic. Anything come to mind for you when we ask for a finance strategic moment?
There's probably a couple of times, but maybe more, but that I found, and now I look for this, which is, think of it as a unifying theme or a metric that, as I look across, and I was doing my version of sort of looking end to end that I described earlier, and I would see disconnects across the different parts of the organization. Now, look, I mean, we're talking tens of thousands of people. These are big organizations. You identify where is kind of the biggest opportunity, and this is where it helps to have been in different parts of the function. And what is a unifying theme or message or metric? And so there's a couple of times in my career where there was not just the theme, but also a specific metric that I saw that would, one, unify everyone along a lot of different functions. So the product team, the data, the finance, sales, and others. And so, for example, it could be a customer metric, sort of how much relevance you have at a share of checkout, for example, if you're a payments company, and finding that metric that, because again, I'm a fan of simplifying things to ideally one, if you can, and then rallying everyone in the organization around, hey, look, this metric is so powerful that if we all rally around building this metric, and it could be, I don't know, number of transactions that a customer does, but it's got to be operational enough that people can connect to it. Because I think if it is too high level, then I don't know how my job connects to it. And
so what you're saying is it's not just what the insight that metric will offer the organization, but the unity that it offers organizations and finance teams to get behind it and to achieve it.
And exactly. And every function sees the kind of the impact they have. Because if it is, for example, yes, your, let's say, number of transactions or share at a particular customer, you can see the product team can measure how what they do can have an impact on that. But also the sales team working with them to say, well, actually, I can help the product team and the analytics team and the data team. And you can really see how sort of ideally, if you can find this one metric that's unifying, and it's, and there's many. Across my career, I probably found at least 3 or 4 where they had this kind of unifying metric, kind of unifying sort of rally around a metric kind of moment. And I've seen other leaders actually use the same approach. And I think finance, however, again, the right broad functional finance leader has probably one of the few people who has that visibility, who can say this metric not only will bring everyone together and rally, but if you actually improve this metric together, it makes a big impact to the organization, and it can be a pivotal, transformational kind of metric.
Can we put you on the spot and ask, is there such a metric that rallied during your first 12 months here at Flywire? Or is there any metric that perhaps got its profile a little raised? Maybe it didn't go in the upper echelons of rallying metrics, but any one metric comes to mind?
Well, initially, I think we started talking more about when I came in around our cash flows and free cash flow and the importance of that. And so we've sort of spend some time on understanding how everything we do results in cash flow. So maybe that's it. But we haven't we've rallied around all sorts of all sorts of things here. So I would say that's just more focus on our margin and cash flows, I think has been something kind of, and again, as you pivot as a company, the focus, a lot of times is around revenue, which is very important, but balancing that with the outputs of cash flow and free cash flow, I think is a good balancing factor.
Is it simply just bringing greater visibility to cash flows across the organization?
Yeah.
I mean, is that done with a dashboard, or is that done with Cosmin coming into a meeting and just putting it on the agenda again? Cash flows.
There's, I find education is important. So I think you have to take, time and be patient enough to educate everyone how sort of a dollar of revenue. So we can sort of talk about it as the journey of a dollar, internally, and say, here's how a dollar of revenue becomes a dollar of margin, which maybe people are more familiar with, and then becomes a dollar of cash flow, which is what, shareholders and others usually tend to look at when they value the company. And being able to understand, here's how, if you're in a product team and you spend capital, that's a dollar that you're spending, and that goes against your cash. But then, if you drive this improved product experience, or you launch a new product, or you improve a margin of a product, then that helps you. So I think spending time, I would say education, simplifying the story many times, and narrow, because there's like a million things obviously that could impact cash flow, but just getting it to the narrow components and be able to look people in the room across the table and say, this is how you participate in this, and making it real for them. Then they understand, okay, that's how I can help with this. And it's not just finance giving me like another P&L that I have to look at. It makes it real for me. And it actually being able to give them a number, say like, here's what you can do. You hit this number, then it'll help this outcome.
Are you tired of manual, fragmented, and time-consuming expense management processes? Then the U.S. Bank Commercial Rewards Card might be right for your business. More than just a card, it's an all-in-one card, expense, and travel management solution that replaces outdated expense management methods with a single intuitive platform. Specifically designed to scale with your growing business, it provides the control and real-time insights into spend that you need. It integrates with your existing tools, lets you set custom spend policies, captures all expenses automatically, and liability is kept at the corporate level. Employees can even book travel right in the platform. You also get to choose your rewards, either points or rebates, all while saving money with no annual fee. So why wait? Manage your cash flow better and streamline your business operations today with the U.S. Bank Commercial Rewards Card. Visit usbank.com/CFO to learn more. Thank you, Cosmin. We're going to jump to our mentoring round. I'm sorry I asked you a few extra questions, so we're a little behind, but I'll jump in, put it in fast forward here. We're actually interested in our guests to find out something from the personal side. Is there anything you can share with us? I hear you have 4 offspring. You grew up in South Africa and were born in Romania. I mean, this is quite an involved life that you have. What would you share with us from the personal side? Something maybe perhaps your colleagues might not have learned about you yet.
Yeah, I'm pretty open, but yeah. So born in Romania, I used to speak Romanian and French. My parents immigrated, sort of a typical, maybe not so typical, kind of overnight, left Romania, went to Cape Town, South Africa. I had to learn English in high school. My first day of high school, I did not speak any English. It was rough. So whenever my boys complain about changing schools, now that we've actually moved from the West Coast to the East Coast for my role, and they had to change schools, a couple of them, I was like, look, you're easy because you had just, you can speak English already. So you'll learn fast. And then I went to a university that actually spoke Afrikaans. So South Africa was going through a lot of turmoil at the time. And so I actually went to an Afrikaans speaking university. They wouldn't speak English to me, so I had to learn Afrikaans. And that was also tough. So I had to learn a bunch of languages, but sort of, I guess it was my training before my training as far as being able to quickly adapt. So adaptability and flexibility, I think people know that about me. But I'd say sort of on a personal, I mean, my wife and I both, career, sort of oriented, and we have 4 boys. Started with identical twins. They're 21 years old, now. And, I have an 18-year-old and a 12-year-old. So our house is never boring. But we're also we're very sort of business oriented. My wife's a lawyer and I'm a finance guy. So you can imagine these kids have no chance of anybody, sort of with any good. We're very creative as a family. I love to paint. We do, sort of, pumpkin carving competitions in our family. So we're a very creative bunch. So outside of PowerPoint slides, which is my sort of creative outlet here, I do enjoy some artistic outlets.
Yeah, interesting how being challenged from a communications perspective throughout most of your younger years might have drawn you into that communications world when it came to finance as well. Any book that influenced your thinking or resource that you depend on that you can recommend to before we go? Something that maybe it's just enjoyment, maybe it's escapism. I don't know, but a book or some resource that you enjoy.
I'm a big fan of, any nonfiction in the, Lord of the Rings type area. But as far as business, I would say recent reading, I enjoy sort of Scaling Up Excellence. I think, Robert Sutton, it talks about how you can impact, a scale organization and drive sort of that, that mindset. It's a helpful book, especially as you drive in scale, as a leader.
Nice. Good choice for us. We're up to our final question. We're going to ask you to look forward finally, and we'd like to know what your priorities are for the coming 12 months at Flywire.
Well, look, as I said, we're very much, sort of, our business is around international students. So all this immigration, sort of conversations out there do have an impact on us. We've had to navigate those uncertain macro waters. And so the same as everyone else right now. So navigating that macro uncertainty, I would say, but for finance in particular, it's going to be around, data and systems and the, ability to sort of fully automate a lot and improve the lives, of our teammates. I think it's a big focus area for us, in particular data, being sort of the number one area. So you can call it AI, but I would sort of go one level below that and say, get the data right, AI will come.
Yeah, you made that very clear to us. So we enjoyed our time with Cosmin Pitigoi. Thank you for joining us, Cosmin.
Thanks so much, Jack. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Hello, everyone. Jack here. Hope you've been enjoying our recent episodes of CFO Thought Leader. Please know that I don't take for granted this opportunity to serve you. Your time is valuable, and of course, so is the time of our CFO guests. I'll admit to you on certain weeks, I will pinch myself and say, hey, I get to do this for a living. I speak to all these impressive leaders. Undoubtedly, there are more aggressive interviewers out there, some who leave no stone unturned. But our swim lane is for finance leaders only. And those finance leaders have a unique style of leadership, one that is rooted in the burden of trust. In light of this, finance leaders must take great care not to forfeit this trust as they step into the role of being a more expressive leader. And that is what CFO Thought Leader is really about. That's why I try to remind myself week in, week out, how fortunate I am. Still, I need your help. Tell us what we're doing right. Tell us what we're doing wrong. Email me your comments at jack@cfothoughtleader.com. And please visit cfothoughtleader.com. You'll find a listener survey right on the nav bar. As always, thank you for listening.